most good software engineering teams, right, always struggle with product management. Why is that? Because actually you get a boss like me, a product CEO. Obviously, I have a view on what products to produce. I think from a business side, I'm not sure AI, especially this generative AI space, is quite ready yet.
Wait, what are you up to next?
I've become more and more interested in AI because obviously it's going to change the world. Problem with AI today, LLM tech, really, in general, is that the error rate is still too high.
Imagine this the entire business in the light of it.
Then, of course, AI is going to change things,
Hmm.
but it's incredibly hard for anyone right now to sort of figure out how that's going to happen. And after it's happened, they're going to go, oh, that was pretty obvious. This is a story about Israel and mobile phones,
Yeah.
right? They just skipped the whole step of
Yeah.
POTS lines, right? Business side, I think the good news is then don't panic, right? We've got time.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pragmatic AI, a podcast where we dive deep into the real stories from AI trenches, speaking with luminaries from the global AI ecosystem. You might be wondering why another AI podcast. Our goal is simple to bring authenticity to AI conversations and cut through the hype. Each episode will feature industry leaders, from founders to VCs to AI leaders to academics. These are people who have been building AI systems for the last 10, 15, 20 years. These are people who have seen through multiple AI hype cycles. I'm your host, Anuj Gupta. I'm a seasoned AI executive with more than 20 years of experience of working in core AI. I have incubated large AI teams across geographies. I now work as on-demand head of AI, helping clients adopt AI faster and drive ROI from their AI efforts. Recently, we helped a YC company build a bunch of critical AI systems, demoed to none other than Sam Altman and Vinod Khosla, securing Series B from Khosla Ventures for this startup. I've also co-authored a major book in AI. The book gives a point of view of how do you do AI when you're part of industry and startups, as opposed to research labs and academia. The book has been endorsed by top leaders coming from Carnegie Mellon, UCSG, DeepMind, Google AI, and many more. Join us as we explore the pragmatic side of AI, where the real stories are told. Hi, everyone. Today, in episode 6 of our podcast, Pragmatic AI, we have none other than Sumir Karayi. Sumir is the founder and former CEO of Vani, led the company to prominence in enterprise software, specializing in IT efficiency, digital employee experience, and AI driven solutions. Under his leadership, Vani secured a strategic partnership with Carlyle Group in 2021 and was acquired by TeamViewer in 2024. Summer actively nurtures entrepreneur talent as a judge for EY Entrepreneur of the Year in London and Southeast. Passionate about social impact, he champions education through Fair Chance Foundation, partnering with Warwick and University of Delhi to empower young women in India through higher education and meaningful employment. We are great to have Samir on our show. Hey, hi Samir, how have you been?
Hi, Anuj. I have been very busy, but I'm free as a bird now.
And I hope busy in a good sense, in a great sense.
Yeah, busy in a great sense, actually. So, a company I started a very long time ago, nearly 27 years ago. We finally sold. My partners, which were Carlyle and me, we finally sold it. This company called One E, very dear to my heart, my life's work in a sense. So I ran it for the first 24 years and sold the majority to Carlyle, and then took a step back. And now One E's found a great new home with TeamViewer, which is a German company that's just bought One E, and actually it's a marriage made in heaven. They want to go into the enterprise space and really sort of have the kind of technology that One E has, and this gives One E itself, even though it's fully acquired, it actually gives One E this kind of scale that I've always dreamt about.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. And congratulations. I'm sure this must be a mixed emotion while all of your work has culminated in a great way. It's also parting way from something that you have given a large part of your life to, right? So I think that itself could be a great segue. What are you up to next? How are you thinking?
Well, it's a great question. I've had some time to prepare for this over the last sort of 3 years, and I've become more and more interested in AI because obviously it's going to change the world, right? And it already is. I think it's overestimated how quickly it's going to change the world. It always takes longer. I mean, look at the internet, right? It took about 2 decades before the real sort of economic benefit could be seen. And all the sort of predictions that within a year or two, AI is going to change the world has not come to pass. I think it always takes quite a bit longer. But I think the change itself is going to be just as big as everyone's predicting, maybe even bigger. It's going to be across the board in absolutely everything we do. And I think we've got time to prepare for it. So that's exactly what I've been doing.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic, right? And I mean, I completely agree, right? This is one of those moments that no matter who you are, you can't necessarily, I mean, you can't prepare for this because the kind of impact it's going to happen, I don't think so there's any precedence before this, right? Uh, Samir, you come from a very rich business background, right? One of the things in our world, right, and when I say our world is from an engineer, scientist uh, point of view in AI is we're seeing not enough business leaders take the plunge. They're still kind of sitting on the fence, still kind of thinking, processing, while actively, but they're not taking an active plunge. What do you think could be some of the reasons? If you have had any conversations in your group circles, would love to hear from you and would love if you can share more insights into that side.
Sure. I think from a business side, I'm not sure AI, especially this generative AI space, is quite ready yet. I think it can do amazing things. I mean, this morning, for example, I'm mostly an investor now, and so to sort of really revise my investment thesis, given the geopolitics happening right now, I actually went into deep research into ChatGPT and got a document, which I think is second to none, really, in terms of how well it's laid out. And it only took a few iterations, right? It was really quite magical what you can do with it. But the fact is, across the board, what business leaders need is automation, right? That's what software does. Software is always used for one thing, right? Automation. The problem with AI today, LLM tech, really, in general, is that the error rate is still too high. The hallucinations are still there. And the problem with automation is if you put an error into a systemic sort of, in a systemic way, then it's just going to repeat itself like lots and lots of times. And that automation might have, 10,000 consequences. And so I think for business leaders today to use LLM in automation, like they use software in general, yeah, it's a high risk strategy. So I'm not too sure it's quite ready yet. But there are many other aspects of AI, like ML, that are absolutely ready. If you've got a lot of data, the kind of analysis you can do with it, and the kind of new products you can produce now, yeah, it's absolutely ready. It's fit for fit for market sort of in the sense that you can produce product today, and you can do things with it that was simply not possible. And if you go back to LLMs, I mean, today they are absolutely brilliant at augmenting humans, and it's totally fit for purpose for that, because human beings are really good at discerning whether an answer is right or wrong. We've got this super skill, right? And so augmenting humans works incredibly well, just the way I used it this morning. The problem with that is it's really hard to justify a human augmentation or an individual augmentation as either a business process or in ROI terms, et cetera, et cetera. It's just really hard to justify. So yes, most people are investing in ChatGPT, Google, et cetera, or their own LLMs as well. But right now, the ROI is really quite hard to sort of figure out
Yeah.
with the LLMs.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And this actually opens up, I think, the podcast to a couple of interesting questions, right? So one part is that you said there is error, right? Now, traditionally, the argument that people like us who have been on the side of being builders of AI systems and AI models have been, the world so far has always seen deterministic software, where, and by deterministic is once you freeze a system and you freeze the input, then the output is frozen. No matter how many times you run it, you will get the same output unless you change something in the software itself. Now, AI by its very design, right, the underlying mathematical underpinnings, right, it's an optimization problem. I'm not going to go into the depths of it, but there is randomization. So there are coin tossings that happen inside this machine, and then based on that, it has bearing on the answers. So the word we have now gone to is, now what we have is an engine, which is a stochastic engine or a probabilistic engine, which once in a while will throw up any kind of garbage. In the machine learning world, the garbage was fairly recognizable. I would say LLMs tend to do this in a very eloquent way, right? So while they lie, while they get things wrong, just that it is highly polished, that sometimes becomes difficult to get it. But the point I'm trying to make somewhere is taking away that fact from AI could take ages because the very mathematical formulations the world has done so far, but I'm talking of all the work over last 70 years or so, right? Probabilistic nature is very at the heart of it. Now that is not going to go anytime soon. 2 years, 5 years, maybe 7 or 10 years also. So where does, and I also agree to the point, right? I've been a huge proponent of myself that you can build the greatest AI in industry, but they are models that will go only on shelves. They will build CVs and careers. Business needs hard returns. And any business leader wants, if I'm putting X, I should get at least 3 or 4X. It's not a 10X, right? Kind of a game. So there are these two things. One, there's not enough ROI. The ROI is limited because these are stochastic systems. So that is not going to go anywhere. So how are business leaders thinking of this now? Because if the hope is that this will go away anytime soon, that is not happening for sure.
Well, from a business side, I think the good news is then don't panic, right? We've got time. Yeah. And this whole prediction that people were making that, hallucination problem is going to go away in a year or two. It's not happening clearly, right? And so I think we've got time. There are use cases that absolutely work today. Okay.
Yep.
So if business leaders are not investing in those, they're really missing massive opportunities. If you just think about every business produces software today, right? Every business is writing something, right?
Yeah.
Some business is writing a lot of software, some business is writing a little bit, but every business is writing some software.
Yep.
If your software engineers today are not using AI, right, as in some kind of copilot or LLM sort of technology, then they're really missing an opportunity, right? They're missing a massive opportunity. And I think the way engineers came at it, of course, was, oh, I'll just get it to do some, autocorrect and auto whatever, produce a couple of lines of code for me. But actually, slowly, I'm seeing more and more people now think about the whole product itself. And I think the great failure in the software industry has been product management, right? And most good software engineering teams, right, always struggle with product management. Why is that? Because actually, you get a boss like me, a product CEO. Obviously, I have a view on what products to produce.
Yeah.
In general, we'll go straight to the engineering head, right, or the lead person. That's the architect for the product, and I'm going to just sit down with them and go, all right, let's build this, right? And you've got this poor product engineer, manager in the middle, sort of going, I've got to find a thing. So what do? They try and insert themselves and slow the whole process down, right?
Mm.
And I have spoken to so many software leaders, right, who go, okay, I'm trying to figure out what this product manager really does, other than produce a lot of documents that everyone needs to read and then ignore, right?
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be just so much better? And I'm now starting to see it, where product management actually do a lot of the prototyping, where they actually prototype so you have a conversation with them, they can actually prototype something, they can get AI to actually build that and show it, and ideally you go and show it to the customer, right? You show it to the stakeholders. You go, this is not really the software that we are going to give you, but if the software does exactly this,
Yes.
would you buy it?
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't happen in general, by the way, right? But it's starting to. I'm starting to see people do it.
Yes.
And I think for the first time, I think we may actually have product management, right, that really lead rather than try and slow everything down. Yeah. And I don't mean this in a terrible way, but I think most product managers I've worked with are conscientious, very good technically, often are ex-engineers. But the problem is that they get stuck between the real sort of product owner, I suppose, which is the product CEO often, or someone very senior in the business, or even a customer, and the engineering person who's actually designing the product. They just get stuck in the middle, right? Because what is their value? So then they start inventing their own job, right? They start inventing stuff that you don't really need to do. So I think I see AI now starting to change dramatically how we think about SDLC in total, in its entirety. And these efficiencies are coming in because of the massive capabilities of the product, of the AI, solutions.
No, great, great. I think I'm absolutely loving this, right? So what you are basically saying here is, because ultimately it's the product CEO who has the vision, but somebody needs to translate it into a language which the engineers can understand better. Now, so far, product managers have been kind of force-fitting them by producing a lot of documents, which doesn't necessarily help. Now, because of AI, they can quickly prototype, build out the skeletons, which can give the look and feel, might not have the full functionality in, but can give the look and feel, so that with that itself can become one, an artifact to communicate with the product CEO. This is what we want to build, and an artifact with the engineers. This is what we want to build. Now you go ahead and go about building it, right? That's the point you're making, right? Absolutely love it, right? As a matter of fact, we have been saying for almost 2 years now, one of the biggest things that the GPTs of the world has changed is that to build a V0 and take it to the market, you now don't need an engineering team. We are slowly, and we are almost getting to a point whereby a very smart business guy who can sell a lot, and a guy who can just assemble, and I use this word very carefully, kind of just assemble, hack together something which is good enough to demo, take it to the market, just have lots and lots and lots of those conversations rather than just run PPTs, and get a better sense of, are we building the right thing?
So you've got it. That is exactly right. And I think that is so much more valuable than a document. Yeah.
Yes.
To be quite honest, I mean, in my past life, I mean, we've gone through so many of these documents. I pretty much, you'd scan the document the first time around, then you never referred back to it.
Yes.
Yeah. Whoever refers back to the spec document. And guess what? It's also a contentious thing anyway, right? Because the engineer then goes, well, you told me in the spec document to put this thing in, right? It was, you asked me for this in pink, right? And the product person sort of going, yeah, but it doesn't work. Yeah. And you get this, because it's not a live thing, right? What you want is something that's live. You can play with it. You can go, well, actually, I wanted this in pink, right? And it's incredibly important that that we change the nature of SDLC into a completely dynamic one, right? The idea that you have things that are static and documents that are defining things on how things should work, but have no actual relevance in the SDLC itself feels really arcane to me, right? Ideally, I want it all to be self-documenting. I don't want anyone producing a document. Yeah.
Yes.
And then actually, hopefully, we get to a point where we get um, great prototypes. But I come from the enterprise space, right? So our software used to run on hundreds of thousands of machines, right? And so we had to do things properly, and some of them were old school, right? I mean, they had to be written, in actually some of our code, some of the core code was C++. Why? Because it just had to run super efficiently. So
Yes.
that's the space I come from. And ChatGPT is still not there, right? It's not going to
Yeah.
be there, I don't think, for a while. This is a very specialist sort of skill set. You'll still need specialists. They'll be able to get a huge amount of help from AI, but you'll still need these people. My worry actually in this, now that I've mentioned the specialism, is really how do younger people get into that? How do they get that skill set?
Yeah.
Because you get the older folks who've got this specialism, they've
Yeah.
got the skills,
Yeah.
but they took years to get to that point. So
Yeah.
that's my obvious worry about how do we build that
No,
deep
great
skills.
point. And I was talking exactly of the same thing with somebody yesterday. I will come to this point maybe a little later in the conversation. Right? But going back to the other point that you make, right? That the business leaders require that reliability in software. I believe that's where you need. So not every problem today can be solved using AI well, right? There are problems where AI is extremely dangerous and unfit to be used purely,
Okay.
right? Because the cost of a mistake is very, very high, right? So be it be a warfare or be it be you're doing something with drugs or all of that stuff, right? But there are a lot of these scenarios where it's okay to make a mistake, right? So imagine you're generating a content. I'm a marketing guy. I just said, okay, here I'm writing an article over blah blah. Can you give me an image over blah 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 and so on, and it will create something. And I find it is not up to the mark. I can go back and do it. The point I'm trying to say is where I believe when internet happened, and I'm using this point because that is where we started. 99% of the companies and people saw internet as a channel of distribution. There is this 1% that saw internet as a business itself. And it is this 1% that went on to rule the tech world for next 25, 30 years, right? The Google, the Facebooks, they're all product of that. I think today, what I believe is 99% of the people, teams, organizations of thinking of AI as a way to optimize their operations. Absolutely no question about that. You should absolutely go ahead and do it. But in my humble opinion and experience, that's not the true power. The true power lies in reimagining your business itself in the light of AI. And I'll give a quick example, and then I'll kind of would love to know why more business leaders are not doing that, right? So when we had text to images moment, right? Everybody said, "Oh,
Yeah.
the job of designers is over." Right? You have hundreds of influencers who will just make all of this uh, predictions and stuff like that. Today, the fact is, so I was recently using that to try and generate an image. Now that there were parts of the image that were amazingly good. I loved it.
Right.
But there were parts which were not up to the mark. There were spelling mistakes and all that. And these models tend to do that a lot. Now, I can use that image to go to my designer and say, hey, this is what I love. This is the part I want to do away with, to do that. But he will have to still start from scratch. Just that what if to be built is now in front of his eyes. A far better way could have been where instead of producing the image, if the system would produce the Figma file, if I may say,
Mm-hmm.
now I can directly go and keep certain elements and remove other elements. So how the Figmas of the world have to think is that the base image will not be designed from scratch. The base image will come using our elements. So we need to produce that language, which is already there.
Yeah, right.
For the GPTs of the world, which are image generating, actually don't produce the final JPG. They produce this intermediary or the product or the end thing in this intermediary language, which is editable.
Sure.
And then my designer suddenly is 80% more efficient, right? Because he already has a lot of things to start with. He knows what to remove. Even I myself can sit and do that. That is what I meant by reimagining the whole. So the Figmas of the world are still having co-pilots whereby you can give stuff, they will create this image and they'll show you the image. But I don't want the entire image. There are parts I love, there are parts I don't love.
Yeah.
So you'll have to bake it into deeper into your workflows. You have to sit and think how somebody does. So the question to you, right, coming back again is, at least from the world we come, we don't see a lot of business leaders reimagining the product, the whole value prop itself in the light of AI. And the troublesome part that we see with this, when we have events like Samsung losing $133 billion valuation because it is seen slow on internet or AI, sorry. Disney losing 15% compared to Netflix because it is seen slow on AI. Or Czech losing 40% because the GPT is at the moment. That will happen. So, what will it take to empower more business leaders to imagine? Sorry, I'm going a little longer, but I just wanted to give the totality of the question. To really empower them to start thinking from scratch, reimagine the entire business in the light of it.
I think this is obviously the $1 million question, right? Let's just think about this first of all historically, right? The internet, yeah, came and a whole bunch of businesses didn't survive. The example that everyone takes is digital photography and Kodak, right? That's the obvious one. But interesting enough, when the internet first sort of started up, as in when it started becoming really quite huge, there were a huge number of companies that started, like Boo.com in the UK and AOL. Does anyone still exist? I don't know. Anyway, and Yahoo, et cetera, right? And these were some of the biggest businesses around, and now they're not. The fact is, it is with any change that happens in the industry, any big change, there are winners and losers, right? It's actually incredibly hard to have a formula that shows who the winners and losers are going to be. I was actually listening to one of the big sort of macro hedge fund folks, and actually a few of them are saying this, right? That of course AI is going to change things, but it's incredibly hard for anyone right now to sort of figure out how that's going to happen. And after it's happened, they're going to go, "Oh, that was pretty obvious," right? So I think from a business perspective, there are a few points. There are some advantages that incumbents have. But before I get to that, and these are the advantages, by the way, all CEOs should be thinking about. But before I get to that, the change is not likely to happen, by the way, inside a lot of these businesses. The change is more likely to happen in some small startup out in Timbuktu, right? Because they have a massive need for something that they don't even have today. This whole sort of, you remember this whole story about Israel and mobile phones, right? They just skipped the whole step of POTS lines, right? Because they just went straight mobile, right? And many countries have done that. They've gone straight mobile, right? Because they never had the plain on telephone system, the POTS system. So they didn't have the lines. They're never going to get the lines. So guess what? They just went that way. So you're going to have the uses of AI where there wasn't something already in place. I think that's where a lot of sort of invention comes from. And that's exactly what happened with the internet. That's, invention did not come, a lot of the invention did not come from these big companies. But let's not forget that the incumbents have massive advantages. So what are their advantages? Number one, they've got scale. So what scale do they have? They've got people, they've got money, they've got customers, they've got distribution, right?
Yeah.
So when an incumbent comes across an idea, their ability to take that idea, and ideas, by the way, are really hard to protect, right? I'm not talking about patents. That's when you protected the idea. But just a general idea. So you're not sort of stealing anything, but a way of doing something, right? Yeah. It's really hard to protect it. And my last company, we invented a lot of stuff. We had 40 patents, right? And so I do know this sort of space. It's really, really hard to protect a general idea, as long as someone's not stealing the specifics, the process in which you use that idea.
Yeah.
So the incumbents have all of these advantages over and above someone who's just started up this idea, right? And if the incumbents are sensible, and look at Microsoft, right? This is what Microsoft's entire business model's been, right? They look at what someone else is doing, and then they do it better at scale, and they take it out to the whole market, right? And they've been doing this for a very long time, and in an incredibly successful way, where they are one of the largest companies. So I don't think the problem right now for the CEOs in large companies is to be on top of AI. I think what they need to be on top of is looking at what everyone else is doing and being nimble enough to turn on a dime. Yeah. And I think there is a myth right now. And I think this is, by the way, we might not fully agree on this because you're part of the deep AI community. I'm sort of not really, right? Yeah. And I love AI. I love the use of it. But I think for a business person right now to make a big investment, let's say a 5% investment even of their full IT budget, their tech budget, into one specific AI field where they don't know what's going to happen, right, is a very big bet. It's a 1 in 20. They can only have 20 of those, but most of those that money is already gone. So they can probably only do 1 or 2 of those bets, right?
Yeah.
I think it's much more advantageous for them to think about the incumbent advantages, look at what's going on in the market, and this is what their product managers really should be doing. They should be really looking at their space properly and coming back with great ideas, coming back with and talking to their customers as well, because the customers are going to be looking at the space and come back and say, okay, this is what we can do with AI, right? And at this point, they don't need to steal anything, right? They've got all the advantages in producing something themselves.
Yeah.
I think this is where the investments are better off. Of course, they should have some research, because one of the advantages of spending some money on AI is that you build muscle memory, right? You just get to know how to do stuff. You need ML ops, you need basically AI ops. You need that sort of skill set, that sort of base level skill set. Well, that you should be investing in anyway. But that's not a massive investment.
Fantastic. Makes sense. But the point that you make, right? If the one takeaway for me is the nimbleness, and that has to be not just at a CEO level, but at an org level, right? But in a way, Sumir, who better than you to know that the larger the organizations grow, the lesser is the nimbleness, right? The oracles of the world were called 800-pound gorillas or the dinosaurs, precisely for the reason. And we all know, right? The nimbleness of an early stage startup versus a large organization. So, in a way, that's kind of contradictory as well, because that's what most large organizations kind of deliver with. But I take your point, right? What you are saying is be extremely aware and be ready to kind of move very, very fast when you see something as a large organization. I think that itself is going to be a big challenge. Okay. Any other point that comes to your mind or any other point of view on?
So I just want to go back to this whole incumbent advantage, right? Yeah. So let's say I have a small startup. You've got a massive organization with 1,000 engineers. I've got a startup, right? Now, let's say I am a year ahead of you. I've been building the stuff. It's just about ready for market, or it is ready for market. I've got version one out, right?
Mm.
You haven't even started yet. Okay. Now I've got 20 people working in my organization. Yes, I've got some VC money. But I've got 20 people working in the org, right? I'm going to start scaling now. And now I get my second or third round of VC money. I can scale. I think I've got 100 mil now, right? I can go and scale this. I still don't have my customer base. I've got to start
Yeah.
there. I have no distribution. I don't even know how to distribute yet.
Yeah.
I got to train an entire sales force, right?
Yeah.
My product's ready at this point. Okay.
Right.
Um, I don't know how to support it properly because I've never had to. I've not sold anything. So I've got
Yeah.
none of these things set up. You start right now. Okay.
Yes.
You've now seen this product. You actually already know what kind of product you want to build. You build it in your own way, whichever way you want to build it. But you will, I promise you, if you move today, even though my product's just out, if you move today
Yes.
and you build a product with a similar kind of sort of capability in your own way, and obviously no theft, your chances of winning this war are much greater than mine,
Sure. Sure.
right? And a lot of people tend to think that it's all around startups. It's not.
No.
Actually, the incumbents often win, and they
Yeah.
win more than often.
Yeah.
It's just that sometimes they just don't react, right? Yeah, and
Interesting.
that's a big mistake.
Interesting. So I have always believed that the incumbents, one of their biggest advantages is the large amounts of cash and resources they are sitting with. And I believe a lot of startups are coming up, they're fighting, and all of that has happened. Some of them are going to emerge as winners. And these are the ones that will be acquired by the incumbents. Right now, whether
And
the acquisition happens successfully or not is a separate story altogether. But largely, I see that as a route for a lot of them. Right. But the point I'm just trying to put is uh, the large organizations have to be very aware of what is happening in the ecosystem very actively, right? And that's exactly the point you're also making, right? So I think if
exactly,
somebody is not even doing that, then there should be alarm bells all along, right? That's the
100%,
point.
and also build some muscle memory in terms of how AI works, right? Just
Yeah,
start using it.
yeah,
Do little experiments, right?
yeah.
You don't need to put 5% of your budget in it, but just do a bunch of experiments. Yeah, experiments are really interesting, right? In my last company, we did experiments all the time, and the idea was most of them will fail. But guess what? What you land up doing is you land up building a meta skill of invention,
Hmm,
which is incredibly valuable. And in the
hmm.
AI space, if you're not doing anything today, just to get yours, just to get into that space, just to start understanding how AI really works, right, is going to take a while.
Absolutely. But in a world, so many, especially if you look at this year and maybe the last, right, where optimization is the mantra, right? How do you justify a team whose whole job is to do only experiments? The point I'm just trying to say is that you can't have this in every team. But what you need is a very active CXO team who consciously creates one or two of these teams that might even directly report to them, surpasses all that hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
So going back to the world, and there's a very interesting example that I read once about Apple and how Steve Jobs used to run. So he had used to have two teams. One he used to call as sailors, who used to do a lot of regular stuff and stuff like
Mm.
that. And he would have another team which was called pirates. And the whole job of sailors were to, like an army, extremely disciplined, get up in the morning, do this, go by the calendar, blah blah. Pirates don't care a damn about throw everything. Here is something. Here is a treasure. Go after the treasure and win it. What you are suggesting here is that CXO's team have to actively create these teams of pirates who might not be part of your regular navy, right? And do a lot of this active experimentation and work directly with them.
So yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. I'm not sure I'm really recommending that, right?
Okay.
I think those models fit, different models fit different companies. And one of the things I've been a judge on a entrepreneur competition of fast growing businesses for a few years,
Mm,
and I've probably talked to about 100 entrepreneurs in depth, right?
mm,
Or interviewed them. And the one conclusion I've sort of come to is every entrepreneur is different. And
mm,
interesting enough, their business is totally different as well. And I think even as businesses grow, they still remain really quite different, right? So
mm.
there's one size fits all doesn't work. I mean, it just
Sure,
doesn't. Yeah,
sure.
in my experience, and I think if you look at a lot of IT projects for that reason, and especially engineering theories, right? You remember test-driven development? That was one I used to really hate, right? Yeah, you can't invent anything with that because you need to know what the invention is going to lead you to, right? Anyway, let me come back to the point. So I think the biggest issue I think we've got is when you want to innovate, if you innovate completely outside, in this Pirates team,
Mm,
that might not work in some companies. And a lot of banks actually failed when they set up little sort of garage, sort of, almost startups
mm,
outside of their normal teams, because
mm.
those products still had to work in a secure kind of way. They still had to have all the normal sort of banking regulations and all tick boxes in them. So they'd
Sure.
produce something and then pretty much it was throwaway.
Mm,
So that didn't work in banking, but it actually worked in some other industries. Actually, in
yeah,
tech, it worked incredibly well,
good.
right?
Good.
So I think, and it's not even all tech, right? Because a lot of tech has to sort of is regulated. So I think what you need to do is really figure out what sort of model works for your organization.
Mm,
The different models I've seen are this one, the Pirates one, absolutely right. There's another one where you just have one day free, right, for
mm,
innovation.
mm.
Another one where if you've got a well-running, 2 week or a 4 week cycle, an engineering cycle, then you just take some breaks, right? You just every
Yeah.
fourth cycle or something, you just take a cycle out or 2 cycles out. And actually, if you schedule them in, engineers like that, by the way, right? And engineers really like you're not just going to come and interrupt their stuff because
Yes.
they know there's an interruption coming in 3 weeks' time, right? So they already, this is much better for engineering teams. It doesn't matter which one you follow. There is no right or wrong. It just
Mm,
whichever one fits you.
mm,
And I think if you do this properly, I do feel that you can actually achieve quite a lot these days with the APIs for ChatGPT, etc., are fantastic.
yeah.
You can actually achieve a huge amount really, really quickly.
Yes. Yes.
So I think doing some innovation is definitely a good idea.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So coming back to the point we were earlier discussing around this coding and newbies and all, right? So exactly to your point, right? So the analogy I was discussing yesterday is that you have a lot of these junior developers who write code, then they do a git push, but there's a senior developer who maintains the repository. And this guy looks at every request and then accepts, rejects, depending on the code quality and all that. Now, with all this AI tooling coming into code, right? And I recently saw a demo where the machine took a Jira ticket, took the code base, wrote a patch, pushed in the patch entirely end to end. How good is the patch is a separate question, but it was able to do all this. Now, what you were exactly saying is that we will get to a point where we'll need a lot of these senior engineers who can review the code, but this time the code will be written by machines. And because these machines are and making mistakes, your degree of skill is very high. But this guy,
Anuj, you
yeah.
just blanked for a bit. So
Oh,
just
okay.
start that bit
Sorry.
again.
Sorry. We will do it again. So what you're saying is that you have this senior engineer now who will now be looking at a lot of this code push, which will be done by machines. But these are LLMs of the world, so they are extremely eloquent in making mistakes. So the degree of skill needed to kind of catch where the fault is, and there would be mistakes. I mean, no two questions about that, right? Would be much higher. But this guy became so skilled because he started from scratch
Yeah.
as a junior engineer, wrote lots and lots of code, made lots of mistakes, got a lot of feedback and reviews, hence he's there. Now, if you remove that lower hierarchy now, how do you produce the next, right? And that's exactly the question I was discussing yesterday with someone. What are your thoughts? I know like this is too early, too difficult to say anything, but I see the same thing in
Yeah.
writing now, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere whereby a lot of people are using GPTs of the world to produce a V0 of an artifact, which is okay. I mean, but that's not correct. There are mistakes, maybe in articulation, maybe in the key part. The skill needed to catch that mistake is higher. But we all humans don't know how to kind of, all muscles are built day by day. We haven't still invented a gym system where we can directly go to the eighth month, skip the first 7 months, and suddenly have a lot of muscles. Same is with the brain, right? Where does it lead to? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think this is a problem across all, it's going to be a problem across all AI enabled businesses.
Yeah,
So it's not just an engineering problem, right? It's also a marketing one. It's like
yeah,
every time someone asks me to write something, I just go into ChatGPT. It gives me the answer. I give it to them. Maybe I scan it quickly, but actually, I'm not developing the muscle memory in actually going through writing word by word, crafting things because actually I'm getting something reasonably good. And the difference between those people who have started off using, and actually this is happening at university level even now, right? So yeah, there was a bit of research that came out. I can't remember who published it, but it was across all out in the UK, across the news, right? And like 9 out of 10 university students are saying that they actually use some LLM to actually produce everything, right?
yeah,
And so, and the problem, so I'm not too worried about the use of AI, by the way. Yeah. So I think it's brilliant. I think
yeah,
it allows us to do more, yeah, go faster, etc. The problem is that the difference between someone who had to do this all by themselves through 20 years and has understood exactly how a message needs to be crafted.
yeah,
They've been beaten up in the past because they got it completely wrong 10 times, right? And they sort of know that these messages don't work, these ones do. They sort of really intrinsically, they have an understanding, right? Of right and wrong, etc. I'm just thinking just marketing messaging even right now,
yeah,
which of course is a hard thing anyway. Not there
yeah,
weren't that many marketing people who could do great messaging. But the ones who've got there, right? The difference between them and the ones who are starting out is huge anyway. It always
yeah.
has been. But how do you now get someone over the next 10 or 20 years to that level, right?
Mm.
Because they just don't have to do the same work. And I think this is true with, writing C++ code, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Why, when you can actually build with massive Lego blocks, why do you need to go down? Yeah, right. And build with the tiniest blocks, right? The most generic code.
yeah.
Because you'll always try and avoid it. So how do we keep those skills in? And I think it's something that I worry about for businesses. There's got to be a period of time in between when AI is not good enough, but it's enough to augment people, but
Mm.
it's not good enough to replace people.
Mm.
And we'll just have this period of time in between where you've got the excellent people starting to retire, right? And you've got this sort of little sort of space. Now, maybe I'm just being a bit pessimistic and AI is going to catch up and it's going to be good enough. But somehow I feel that we are going to have this sort of period in between where AI is not good enough and actually people are not building enough skill.
Interesting. So in our show, we have had a person who gave a very counter argument to this, right? And
Okay.
that's a very interesting point to also think of. He said, let's go back 50 years. We all never had calculators. So our fathers and forefathers did all the calculations mentally. And we all know they were amazingly good. I think even today, my father can calculate mentally faster than me, right? Because right from birth, I have always seen a calculator.
Sure.
But in that world, the problem got solved. So the point I'm making is I am still decently good at maths and other things without actually learning the skill of doing a lot of mental calculations. And I've done even research in mathematics. So he said, I don't know where the answer is going to come from. He doesn't have the answer. But he believes that this analogy of calculator is going to play back again, that the experts will come up and the freshers will find a way to kind of get to that level. And the whole thing will keep on, juggernaut will keep on rolling.
Okay, and I think that's a completely valid argument. If if you can ignore a couple of points, right? Calculators generally do not make mistakes, right? And so there was no error being introduced by calculators
Hmm.
and also what calculators did was extremely well defined,
Hmm.
right? They did a very simple mathematical calculation.
Yeah.
What AI is doing, first of all, is a completely different level of and it's an unbounded level
Hmm.
of task, right?
Hmm.
So for example, um, I was having quite a sort of heated discussion at one point with my son, who's all grown up. And I said, I need to understand his perspective. So guess what I did? I put WhatsApp, my whole WhatsApp message history with them for the last 5 years into
Hmm.
ChatGPT and said, what am I doing wrong? Right. And
Okay.
actually, and I've done lots of therapy. So its answer was absolutely brilliant, right? Its advice to me was absolutely brilliant. And this is what I mean by unbounded, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
I had never imagined before I decided to try this experiment that I would
Hmm.
ever use ChatGPT in that particular way, right? But I did.
Yeah.
And the answers were great. But in the same sort of way, those answers could also be wrong,
Yeah.
right? Because it's unbounded. How we use it is not, because calculators were really well defined, right?
Yes.
They did one thing really well, yeah, arithmetic, yeah. And so I think the chances of us getting things wrong is higher
Hmm.
because we don't know when it's getting things wrong, and also us not learning critical thinking, etc., because we don't have to, us not having feedback on when we write a bad marketing line, right? All of these things are right now ways we learn. Now, I think your friend is probably right that actually human beings are quite ingenious,
Yeah.
and what they tend to do is, we find ways that work
Hmm.
with or without tools, right?
Yeah.
And so, yes, we'll probably work it out. So, in a long-winded way, I'm probably agreeing with you.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. Sumit, just a quick tangent. I think it should be 2 o'clock in your watch,
Yeah,
right?
it is too. Yeah,
Okay. Let's
a
try
few
and
more
wrap this
minutes,
up.
and yeah,
Yeah. Let's wrap this up in max
yeah.
10 minutes, right? So, if you could wish for one advancement on the AI side that you believe would kind of accelerate this AI adoption, what would you wish for?
Well, the one I absolutely would love to have, which is also obviously very hard, is in some sort of guessing factor that the LLM always gives you. So a hallucination factor, effectively, right? Right. When it's sort of somehow, it would be wonderful for all answers to be checked. Yeah. And for it to say, okay, I've got a like an 80%, yeah, of this, I'm pretty sure about. Yeah, or 20% I'm not. Or I'm in general, this is like an 80%, you know, assurance on
Mm,
this answer, or a
mm,
99%. And actually the
mm,
problem is 18 to 99.99% is a variable that we probably can't understand as human beings anyways, right? So what we really want is I'm 100% sure about this, right? I'm not sure about this. If I can just get that, that's already a long way forward, right? Because whenever it's 100% sure of the answer, I can use it in automation.
Yeah.
Whenever it's not 100%, so it's a binary thing even is enough. Yeah. And then getting some sort of percentage, makes life much easier in software, right? Makes life much easier in automation. So if there's one thing I ask the AI, the great geniuses that are inventing AI today, is give me, first of all, a binary, right? I'm 100% sure of this, I'm not. And then give me a sort of sliding scale. I'll be happy.
Okay, fantastic. And if you were to give one advice to the boards, the CXOs, right? What would that be?
Well, it'll be slightly more than one piece of advice, but it's 2 or 3 bits, right? The first one is spend an hour or 2 every day on whichever LLM of choice you have, right? You just have to. So, and because the advances, I mean, today, for example, I started this with, the session with, talking about ChatGPT deep research. I think the reports now we are getting out of some of the LLMs now. I mean, I think you.com has come out with something similar. There's Notebook LLM, Notebook LM from Google. But this deep research capability, is a massive advance, and it just popped out, right? It's just, and so I'm more than happy to pay my $200 a month because I'm finding it so valuable. And I think if you're a CXO level, you need to spend some money on this just so that you yourself understand the true capabilities of these systems. The second point, I would, go back to something we talked about earlier. Do experiments. Just, whatever else you're doing, just do experiments, right? Because experiments will build muscle memory in how to work with AI. And the third one, there's some obvious no-brainers, like augmenting your knowledge workers, making sure your engineers are using Copilot-like technologies, right? Making sure your marketing folks actually know how to use, and make sure that they know how to use AI properly. And some of them you can even pre-train. So I think those are no-brainers. You should just use them. And ML, of course, you should. If you've got data sets, you should be using ML today. So it's really quite simple. This is known. The third one, it's a no-brainer. It'll give you benefits. The ROI is really easy. Experiments will build muscle memory for the next 2 years. So when AI is ready, you're ready as well, right? And you gotta be familiar with this stuff yourself. You've got to understand how AI thinks, because it thinks slightly differently than us, right? And of course it does. It's a different kind of a brain. Yeah. And so you got to understand how it works.
Fantastic. Maybe last question in the interest of time, Sumir. What do you think is the biggest risk that you see in terms of AI or this entire wave that has come?
So Gartner has this hype cycle model, which is so true, right?
Yeah.
And this trough of disillusionment, which is after the hype, you get this sort of this nadir. I think there's a high risk of that happening. And I think it's not just from AI, but I think geopolitics as well. If you look at the Mag 7, their valuations have been at all-time high for the last few months. A lot of people, NVIDIA just released, so I'm really giving you a very macro perspective here, right? So this is really not just about AI. NVIDIA just came out with their results, which are spectacular by any account, and yet nothing happened to the share price, right? Because people have already discounted what spectacular looks like. So actually, even when they're doing spectacular things, right? Yeah, people are going, yeah, okay, whatever. And so I think you're at a point where very easily we can actually have a downturn in terms of, and a little bit of a glitch has already happened, but nothing major. But if a major glitch happens, if a market reassessment happens, then I think we are the AI projects that a lot of people are working on may be pulled back.
Mm.
I think there might be a delay of a year or 2 or 3, right?
Mm.
After this. And if you remember the sort of dot-com boom and and the massive crash that happened, well,
Yeah.
I am a little bit concerned that with a lot of the geopolitical changes that are happening,
Mm.
tariffs are going in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just steam is coming out of the economy.
Yeah.
I think AI might suffer, and
Mm.
certainly AI projects and investment might suffer considerably if we're not careful.
No, fantastic. And I agree with you, right? So unfortunately, a lot of these events seems to be coming together, right?
Yeah.
Which might be hinting at something similar. Whether that happens or not, or whether that can be predicted or not, is a separate question. Yeah, but yeah, cool. Thank you so much, Samir. It's always a pleasure. You always have a very unique point of view and a very deep point of view, right? And this is what we love about exploring in this podcast, a freewheeling conversation where we try and bring different perspectives, right? More from a trenches point of view rather than contributing to the hype. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your wonderful opinions and insights.
Anuj, thank you, and thank you for your friendship, Anuj, and always good to talk to you, and great to be on your podcast.
Cool, cool. Thank you so much, Sumit. Thank you.